Matt said, but I hope it was nice. My name's Bob Safian. I'm the editor of Fast Company. And we have a great group here to talk with you and talk with each other. They've been giving each other a hard time in the green room, so hopefully they'll keep giving each other a hard time out here. I do hope that relatively early, too, we can go to you all and get some questions, so we can have this be a little bit of a conversation back and forth. It's a large room, but it's reasonably intimate, so hopefully we can get some back and forth going on. I'm going to do a little promotion first. Fast Company, as part of Adweek, is doing a session tomorrow in the morning from 9 until 11:30, a leadership summit over at BB King's, which I hope you'll be interested in. There's a really interesting case study from Coca-Cola about their $300 million marketing campaign around the World Cup. There's another one about real-time marketing with Microsoft and MSNBC. And then I'll be doing a panel with some clients who have big budgets, the CMO of GE and IBM and Best Buy and Chipotle and Yahoo. So I hope you can make it there. That's the promotion.
Can we join that panel as well?
Yeah.
The one with the money, I mean.
Welcome.
The one with the money.
The one with the money,
Yeah.
that's the one, yeah.
So let me introduce the panelists we have here, all the way starting on your left. I think I'm doing that right. Rosemary Ryan, who just started a new business called Co. Matt Freeman, who runs Media Brands. Simon Sherwood, who is the head of BBH. And Larry Woodward, who runs, I'm going to miss the name. Graham Stanley, thank you. Sorry. And this panel is sort of part of in some ways, a continuation of panels and discussions that have been going on starting yesterday and will continue through the week about sort of what the direction of the ad industry is going to be. You know, there's a lot of discussion of transformation and transformational change, but to what? I did a panel yesterday with a group of agency executives, and there were some people who were saying we're on the verge of a new golden age for the ad business, and other people who sort of thought that we might be, the ad industry might be going in some ways the ways of the music industry, where expectations have to be changed and technology is sort of making things slightly less abundant. And I hope we'll cover some of that ground with this group. I thought I'd start by asking each of you relatively briefly to describe, because when I described your agencies, I didn't say digital or media or creative or use any words like that. And since there's a lot of discussion about model, if you could just briefly describe your own business. What is it that your agency does or tries to do? Larry?
I'll take that first then. My agency is new. As of April, we started. And what we're trying to do is be one of the first agencies that seamlessly combines traditional with mobile, social, and digital media. So our premise is that in a native form, you have digital agencies and you have traditional agencies. And we're trying to be one of the first that does it on purpose and grows it organically.
All right. Simon?
Okay. BBH started about 30 years ago, and it started as what is now described as a traditional ad agency. We're now a global business, although rather a small one. And we've had to face into all the change that's been occurring in the last few years. We are still an advertising agency, but we're trying to turn ourselves into an advertising agency for the digital age. So we're trying to integrate a lot of skills and capabilities into our proposition, and we're doing that reasonably successfully in some places, less successfully in others, but it's something we're determined to do. That's what we do.
Fair enough. I'm Matt. I run Media Brands Ventures, actually, which is part of IPG's Media Brands. And we're effectively a media holding company. We've got about 20 companies that span from traditional media to outdoor, online, search, social, mobile, etc. And we have really been looking at media in the broadest sense and trying to figure out especially how technology comes in and changes that landscape.
So I'm Rosemary, and we launched our company Co last week. And we believe that Co is a very important prefix for the future, which we think is about collaboration, co-venturing, and co-creation. When we talk about what we are, we describe ourselves as a brand studio. So, when you think back on what Hollywood was many, many years ago, they owned everything. They owned the talent, they owned the props, they owned the people, and all of the money. And then that kind of got blown into a million different pieces. And now what they have is a couple of very senior people who bring the right people and the right talent together around the right project to get it done. And that's kind of what we want to do in the marketing world.
All right, and so, Matt, if I understand right, you're running a holding company that's part of a holding company, right?
Yeah, it sounds exciting,
right?
doesn't it?
I'm just trying to get, and Simon, you have a global company,
Yeah.
but it's part of a holding company also.
We have a minority shareholder who is a holding company, yeah.
Okay.
They have, that's the Publicis Group. They have very little direct influence over our business though.
And are either of you parts of holding companies?
No.
Are
No,
you?
but we are, so Co is like at the center of it, but we have what we call 41 co-conspirators who are other companies who kind of join with us on whatever projects that we need to kind of make happen. So it's not a holding company, we say it's a coalition of the willing, I think.
Okay, but are some of the willing then parts of holding companies?
I think probably 2 of them are, yeah.
Is it a good thing to be part of a holding company? Or is it not a good thing to be part of a holding company?
Yes.
I'll let you say.
That depends entirely where you sit, doesn't it? I mean, and we sit sort of half in, half out, I suppose, so you see it from both sides. I can definitely see some advantages to being part of a holding group. There are definite advantages to consolidation and such like, but there are also huge advantages to being independent as well.
Yeah, I was part for the last decade of a holding company, and I can tell you that in my case, the downside outweighed the upside. It was very difficult to move at the speed that we needed to move at and be part of a holding company. So now we're independent. I miss the money. I certainly miss the potential for investment. But the fact of the matter is that I'm confident that this was the only way to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the reason I ask these questions is because some of the other panels and some of the other discussions, I don't know how many of you have been on them, but are about sort of what the model is that is going to work, right? And in some ways sort of a move from being specialists to being sort of generalists. And some people claiming that, everyone's going to sort of move to the same spot from different places. Rosemary, you're like shaking your head like, no way.
I don't think it's possible, kind of given the way technology is moving and markets growing, for one company to have everything under one roof. I mean, I just don't think that's financially viable because there are so many different ways to go to market these days, and you do need specialists who know how to do that. I think you do also need people who know, like an architect, how to kind of pull the idea or the story together and then orchestrate those specialists around that idea. But the idea that all of them will live in one place, to me, seems unrealistic.
I completely agree with that. I mean, I was told by a very wise client of ours 5 or 6 years ago, we first started trying to get our heads around, what we could do and how we could change and such like. And he said to me, you've got to think about, this guy was thinking in the future, and he said, you've got to think about this like, it's like the Olympic Games. You cannot be a gold medalist in every event.
Yeah.
Okay, you just can't do it. So you've got to pick your events, decide what you're going to be gold medalists in, and recognise that other people will be better at other things. And once you've understood that, then I think it starts to make things quite a lot easier, because you don't try and get your arms around everything and do everything as well as you possibly can.
Or you can be Russia and take a total medal count, I think is the other way to go. Yeah, you're right, as an individual athlete, I think the advantage on the flip side is that you do have the advantages of scale, of capital for investment and acquisition, and you can play a broader role in solving client problems than as a single source provider.
Well, potentially, because one of the things that I found absolutely dreadful within the confines of a holding company is that they were trying to serve 2 masters. All the holding companies went public. And the fact of the matter is that clients are who we traditionally have worked for. And so now you're caught in the middle. And I was in discussions that said that at the end of the year, our stock will be 35. I don't care what has to happen. I don't care if you have to fire and rehire yourself. 35 is where your stock will be. And then I had to, the next day, try to explain to my client why I didn't have the proper amount of people on his business. And the guy I was talking to was a guy who was going to be CMO for 2 years, because that's sort of the average now. And so he was most concerned about, could I move his needle today? Not can I make his brand what his brand should be. Not if I could think about his brand for the future. Not if I could think about the customer that's coming. But could I help him out, please, and get some profits on his sheet by the end of that year so that he could keep his job?
Understood, and I'm not saying it's all rosy. All I'm saying is that, you know, when you're an entrepreneur, your objective is profit as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, it's not like you suddenly have a halo above your head as soon as you leave the holding company.
Yeah.
You know, you're still mercenary in your own way.
I think it is rosy all the time. No. So what I would argue is that I'm not sure so much that it's about scale anymore. I think it is about scalability, and you know, now in our own company, and when we were at JWT, we did partner with other people often to kind of get to the right solution. So as long as you know how to do that, and that's, by the way, not an easy thing to do, I think that you can pretty much solve any problem. You've got, I mean, we're like 10 people, but we're also like 100, you know, 1,015 if I put all the companies together that we're working.
You chose to do this not within JWT. You chose to leave and do something outside. So why?
So the reason I chose, well, twofold actually. First, because I felt it was time to do something on my own. And if I didn't do it now, that was never going to happen, because, you know, the clock was ticking. And secondly, because I think starting from scratch and not having any kind of legacy structures underneath you make achieving what we want to achieve probably a lot easier. I think JWT are trying to move down this path. I don't know how, and I wish them every luck in getting there. But for me, kind of starting from scratch and then kind of building toward what the new model will be was kind of where I wanted to be.
I mean, it's do you guys think that because sometimes there's so much angst about the industry, you know, is this a time that's like, there should be angst, it's like, it's rough, it's hard, or is there something exciting about it, and, you know, how do you walk through those?
I think there's always been a fair amount of drama in the business. When I started in the business, my mother, you know, she said, why do you want to get into advertising? And I talked to her about all the reasons why, and she said, you know, I've been to some dinner parties with those advertising people, and I've noticed two things. They're very smart and they're very paranoid, and that, my darling, is a dangerous combination. and I, you know, so I think there's always been a fair amount of angst in our business. I mean, people are pretty passionate in what they do. I think that there is a lot of soul searching going on, and that's a good thing.
I actually believe this is the most exciting time to be in this business, and I think anyone coming into this business out of, you know, as a graduate, we hire lots of graduates, and it is probably I would think the most, I mean, I've been in the business 30 years, which is slightly worrying, but I think this is the most exciting time I can remember to be in the communications business right now.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I write for ABC News. I have a weekly column, and in this column that comes out Wednesday, I just used this week to celebrate advertising. And I love so much of the work that's being done. I mean, I absolutely love it. And what I would love to have happen is sort of a combination between what was when we were these larger-than-life personalities that everyone followed no matter what industry that they were in, and a combination of now with the technology that we have and the opportunity to really touch consumers, whether you're spending a lot of money or little money. I mean, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. You know, and so I think that whether it's holding company or it's entrepreneurship, I think that what we're all trying to do is to break through with this content that sort of changes the game in a way that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the opportunity to kind of bring together both intelligence and magic, which is what we all do, is you know, there's never been a bigger or better opportunity to do that and get it out there.
It can be very hard. I mean, I live this in the media business, right? Print media, some challenges in this building and other places, right? Of getting people to see the possibilities in new things and not sort of lament the passing of an era where people may have gotten rich or may have you know, had particular kind of life. How do you infuse that spirit in the people you're working with? I mean, Matt, you must have some challenges with this, both straddling up into the holding company that you're part of and down into the companies that you're holding? Did I describe that the right way?
No, that's fine. Slight mocking tone you could take back, but yeah, I bet the words were fine. You know, I actually came into this business as a creative, as a copywriter, and I'm obviously terribly lost at this point running a media company. But to me, the appeal has endured because it's a business that lets you be creative. It's a business that lets you work on problems and figure things out, and I find that terribly engaging. To me, the difference between now and when I started is that creativity has pervaded media, technology, you know, all aspects of our business. And I think in a way, arguably, that it didn't, you know, 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, we're not as much in control. I mean, and if you look back 20, 30 years ago, the media was the media. You had to appropriate it the way that the media wanted
You had a lot of fixed elements in the supply chain, which are now all variables. And to me, that's kind of exciting. Like, that's kind of cool. It means that there's more dimensions of what we do that you can think about and try to do better than the next guy to give your clients unfair advantages.
Yeah.
Now, Larry, you mentioned the rapid, or one of you mentioned the sort of reasonably rapid turnover at CMO ranks at clients. How much of the angst or the challenge that the ad industry faces is because of you know, things that happen at the client level that you are sort of forced to constantly readjust on, whether that's repitch or new people or new strategies?
I think a fair amount of it. I mean, in the holding company, we used to talk about, you know, training our client, you know, but in reality, I think that the problem is that they're in a very difficult way. You know, if you look at CEOs or CMOs, there's been a lot of profit pressure, you know, for a long time now. So it's tough to get a partner there because it's tough for them to want to take a long look because they don't have, they sort of don't have 5-10 years. I worked for the Mars company for a number of years, and largest privately owned company in the world, and they were only concerned with brands for a lifetime. So 1 year's profit didn't matter. 5 years' profit didn't necessarily matter. They were concerned with brands for a lifetime. And when I contrast that with so many of our other clients, that just doesn't exist. It just doesn't, you know, they have to create advertising before you can have the meeting. You know, you're sitting there in the meeting and they know when their media's already bought. You know, we don't know who we're talking to, but the media plan's already done. It's just a very, very difficult world to work in when we're talking about all of these wonderful changes, and the client doesn't want to hear it a lot of times. They don't want to hear digital if they don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the average tenure of a CMO is 22 months.
No, it went up.
Which is pretty remarkable.
Mm.
And if you think about what when a CMO walks into their job, what do they walk into? They walk into a world which is literally turned upside down. So the number of brands that exist out there that they're competing with has gone from 2 million to 8 million. The number of channels that they have to advertise those or communicate those brands on has grown exponentially. And then the number of agencies they have to work with to bring those brands to life has also gone up. What hasn't gone up, in fact what's declined, is the amount of money that they have to actually do that with and the amount of time to execute it. And I think last but not least, finding an audience, which used to be pretty easy to do, is more or less impossible. So they're in a pretty scary position. And I think, we have to...
Who would take that job?
Well, I think it's very hard to fill some of those jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some of the briefs for those jobs. I don't know how anyone can do all of that. I think the job has to be bigger than the job of the CMO. Marketing's got to be the job of the organization. And, I hear a lot of people talking about the fact that, agencies are siloed, or, I think, a lot of client companies are siloed, and the sales force and, the legal department, everybody needs to get involved these days just because of the way marketing works. And I don't think it can be the purview of any one person or department anymore, or shouldn't be.
So another lingering question is how you all should get paid. I mean, I know well.
Handsomely.
Handsomely, I'm sure that's the...
Can I just say something on that client point?
Sure.
Because, it's such a complex issue, this, because I used to worry that the agency business was behind clients. Actually, we're ahead of clients. If you think quite rightly that the advertising business has been slow to change, clients have been even slower. But that's not to say they aren't trying to, accelerate that process of change. But I think what they've wanted is leadership from us, and they haven't had much of it. Therefore, they've gone outside to other areas and sought leadership there, which has kind of made it even more difficult for agencies to take that position. But the slightly strange thing about this kind of conversation is that if you go to, we're obviously sitting here in New York, and I'm based in London, but I spend a lot of my time in China and India and Southeast Asia and Latin America. Wouldn't understand what we're talking about. That it's just not the same. They don't see the issues as being the same. If you work with clients one of our largest clients, our largest client is Unilever. All their growth in the next 5 years is going to come from what they call the developing and emerging world, which is the markets I've just described. And the communication advertising model is very, very, very traditional in those parts of the world. It's 96% TV, and brands are built using proven growth drivers that are used time and time again and lead to success. So I know it's all going to change and accelerate at a very fast rate, obviously, but a lot of this stuff is not really relevant to growing brands and building relationships with consumers in a lot of large parts of the world. So clients are very kind of conflicted about this because parts of their organisation, the kind of brain part of the organisation, which sits in New York or London, is obsessing about all this, but the operational side of the business, which is actually what's delivering the growth, isn't at all really. And so that's why I think there's this kind of real confusion that exists within client organisations as to what the right way forward is.
And I think the interesting thing is that a lot of the testing that they're going to need to do, because there's going to be a fair amount of that, will probably have to happen in the developed markets, not the developing markets, which is not normally how they think about doing things. Because this is where, because technology is moving slightly faster here, it's also where most of their profits are. So that, even though those markets are growing, they still probably don't contribute as much to the bottom line as some of the developed markets. So it is a complicated issue.
Yeah, and getting to the price issue that you're talking about, it's funny because in our business, as procurement has taken a role and as the CMO doesn't have as large a role traditionally as they've had, one of our biggest issues is that we're not the C-suite partners we used to be. When I first got into the business, our CEO had a relationship with their CEO, and so many agencies, except for the most large, the largest and where it matters around the world, those relationships don't exist anymore. And they've heard advertising and they've heard our pricing, because the fact of the matter is that you have to have that kind of importance. What you're able to charge for your service is really driven by how valuable the client believes what you're doing is for them.
What do you guys? Well, I should ask you, Rosemary. So you're starting this new business. You've structured it in an unconventional way, right? So why did you choose that structure? And within that structure, to what extent is that so that you can get better access to the C-suite? To what extent is that so that you can charge for your services in a somewhat different way? I'm not sure whether those things go into the calculation of it.
I think all of the above. Obviously you're going to run a business to make a profit, because if you're not doing that, then you probably shouldn't be in this business. But I think you have to start with a belief about how you think brands are going to get built moving forward in this world. And the reason we structured our agency the way we have is that we think, you don't need a huge amount of people kind of sitting at the center. You do need access to some fantastic talent that sit outside and an ability to bring them in. So our model is about that. It's about bringing people in when we need to solve a particular issue.
Isn't that what a CMO does at a company already? Aren't they the ones who are supposed to be bringing? I think
it's much more complicated. I think about it almost as being like a chief creative officer, because orchestrating the amount of time and energy it takes to, first of all, have an idea that you can orchestrate people around and make sure that idea is big enough, and then actually facilitate that is enormous. And I don't think any one person can necessarily do that.
And have you got a new financial model as well? Are you charging in a different way?
So yeah, we are trying to charge differently. So we charge a flat fee for our services for the center, and then and we do that as kind of more of a consulting model up front, and then when we get to implementation or execution, basically everything's kind of transparent to the client in terms of what everyone else is getting paid, and then we have a fee that kind of goes into the center of that. But we don't need to have, you know, from every agency, 6 account people and 2 planners, and, you know, so it's a much leaner, kind of meaner model for them. So that, and then the third way, which is probably the most important way, is because we're trying to create actions and behaviors that we're putting into the marketplace, we believe that those will generate revenue, additional revenue, new revenue streams for our clients. And when we do that, we'd like to participate in the kind of upside of that. And I know you're doing some of that in the UK, right?
Yeah, everywhere. We have about 5 or 6 different remuneration models that we're experimenting with. Some are costing us a lot of money, but we're learning.
Can you tell us some of the specifics about what the ones that are working well, or what the learnings are that you're getting?
Well, I think from our point of view, the thing that we're trying to do more and more is to have more of our compensation based on some sort of performance measure. Okay, but that means you have to, you know, the more of your income that's variable, the more of your cost has to be variable. So you have to restructure the entire business to make that work. We did this extraordinary piece of analysis whereby we broke down various journals, publish reports about what clients want from agencies. Things like creativity and strategic contribution and all that kind of stuff always comes out on top. And there's a long tail of things that are much less important. If you then apply the traditional fee that you get paid by that client and then look at how much of that fee goes against each of those different things, quite horrifyingly, more than 2/3 of the fee goes against the stuff the client doesn't particularly want. And only 1/3 goes against the kind of stuff that adds value. If you present that information back to your clients, it's quite dangerous in some ways, because they say, well, just cut the 2/3 out there. But if you say, you know, this is what's wrong with this model, it doesn't recognise the difference between the stuff that adds value and the stuff that doesn't. So we're going to try and pioneer a new way, and we're going to put, you know, more of that money needs to go against the things that really build your business and add value. And a lot of that has to go into, a lot of the revenue that comes back to us has to be driven by sort of various performance measures. You know, you can have different kinds of conversations, but you have to put quite a lot of internal restructuring through the back of that. But it's a thing this industry has failed to crack. I mean, when most clients moved from commission to fees, we all thought, eureka, that's it, we've cracked it, it's done. And now we're trying to move away from that. But there's only been 2 financial models in the history of advertising. Yeah. So it's not an easy thing to fix.
Are clients responsive to these ideas? Do the clients want to do this?
Clients are looking for value, and they don't mind paying for real proven drivers of their business. What they're all trying to do, in my experience, is to eliminate all the waste and efficiencies. I have to say, our industry's got a lot to answer for in that respect. I mean, there have been some horrific financial practices that have been implemented and managed for years and years and years within the advertising business. I mean, it is shocking, really.
But we also haven't been paid for the thing that's most valuable. I mean, the fact that, and I know that BBH has a policy of not pitching, but, you know, the fact that we give away probably the single most important piece of value to our clients is also an indication that we're not really.
Makes you start on the wrong foot.
Exactly, you're not starting in the right place.
All right. If any of you all have some questions and you want to jump in, I think there are microphones. Hard for me to see. Oh, there's one over there on the side, and one over here. So there's hands up over here.
So what part of do you think that you're giving away for free to your clients?
The strategy.
You're giving away the strategy for free, and you're not charging.
The things that happen in the pitch to get the business in the first place.
So the strategy, the idea, I mean that, you know, there's a huge amount of energy and work that goes into developing that. Probably more senior work as well, senior people.
And you guys are spending more and more time doing more and more pitching against more and more different people, right? It's the consultants have multiplied and all that stuff.
Yeah, until you stop. It's
Until
never
you
ending. Yeah.
Until you do.
Do you think the marketers have reorganized away from what was the traditional brand management system, which focused on large chunks of spending? Have they reorganized to the slivers? Because you guys are all about, it isn't just 3 or 4 things you have to do these days, it's 15 or 20 to all the touch points. Have they reorganized on the client side to reflect the fact that sliver marketing is probably more important than chunk marketing?
I don't know about slivers and chunks, but I'll take a slightly different approach to answering. I think what's happened from our perspective is marketing organization, product organization, and IT organization have all come much closer together. So our Verizon client has a DVR remote control app that needs to go to the iPad. Is that marketing? Is that product? Is that IT? Yes. So the challenges that they're facing, I think, are colliding a lot of the different components of their organization, which were previously discrete, which is good to see.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Japan recently and I saw that they had, in the subway in Japan, they're growing hydroponic lettuce, which I thought was probably the best piece of communication that I'd seen in a really long time, and kind of built on their kind of story of freshness. I don't know whose idea was that. Did that come from the franchisee? Was that driven by product development? It's a great marketing idea.
So I had a question around advertising at scale. So obviously in the days of television, you could deploy, $100 million and not worry too much about how you were going to do that. In the digital world, it's a different ballgame. It's highly fragmented. It's very difficult to spend that kind of money. Wondering whether what you folks think will be sort of the future of how you'll be able to execute a $100 million campaign on a digital, using digital channels, which might be all there is.
I'll just say quickly, it's sort of a false premise. The days of TV aren't over either.
Well, I didn't claim it is. My
Yeah.
question was more, how would you deploy that kind of capital on in a digital?
Would you ever be in the fortunate position of having to do that? I'd probably say to my client,
This is a pitch
too much
meeting.
money, isn't it?
Too much money.
Yeah, no, look, I think spending that large sums of money online is difficult simply because it's still protoplasmic ecosystem in many ways, but it's also becoming, a lot more, the friction is coming out of the system. So you do see larger and larger sums of marketing investment flowing through digital, and you see the cost of distributing those investments coming down.
Yeah.
So I think it's happening very quickly, and it is becoming much easier to spend large sums of money wisely online.
And also, I think that as clients and agencies come to grips with what it is that you're trying to do, you don't put it's not a chicken or an egg statement. You look at what Toys R Us did last year, which was fabulous, which is they looked at their printing franchise and said, why are we printing this wish book? And then they put it on Facebook, and then they gave parents free Facebook accounts. They gave kids free Twitter accounts. The kids put their Christmas lists on Twitter, and then they told the parents what store they had, for instance, a purple Furby hat that was near them and what the cost was. So all of a sudden, you were dealing with something that cost you $60 million. You did it in $20 million. You did it more efficiently. And what happens? Well, a company they thought was going out of business, like KB Toys, didn't, and it had its best year ever. So more than the $100 million, it's really about understanding what it is you're trying to do and getting the right people in the room and being able to corral them like cats until you can get the solution.
Yeah, it was just a smarter answer than the one I gave before, maybe, is that it's not about scaling the amount of money you can spend, but the amount of people you can reach.
Yeah.
I thought I gave a smarter answer than the
You
one.
did. You clearly did. I'm just trying to redeem myself. Give me a second. We have a business called Cadreon, which is a demand-side platform, and it's this idea of using data to produce 100% composition. That way you can scale an audience without necessarily scaling spend.
Yeah.
I have a question. In the days of disintermediation where everything is broken up, and it seems like clients want to keep it that way and use best of class and use many, many, many agencies, how can you possibly go to all those meetings and figure out how to, work with all those different people from all those different agencies?
It's a great word, disintermediation, isn't it? We see a lot of this happening at the moment, and I think it's one of the big challenges the industry faces in the next year or two. And it's kind of talks to the point I made earlier about the value-added stuff and the stuff that isn't really value-added. And a lot of the stuff that's moving away from what we do is stuff that we can't really add much value. All we can do is the money can pass through us, and we're just in the way. So why not go direct to the supplier if you're a client and get it that way? So that's happening a lot, and that's we have departments in agencies that are built up around just handling that money. So that's part of the restructure that needs to go on. But there are clients also who are looking for a sort of someone to sort of manage this process for them and to sort of take an overarching role in controlling how these various components are used and work together. And I'm just trying very hard to not say the words lead agency, because that's the kind of old part of me that always, being an ad guy, you want to go with a lead agency, of course, because we're the ones you spend most money with. But it isn't about that at all. But often there are companies that we've encountered who actually want the agency to help them coordinate, manage, and control this disintermediated process that they're embarking on.
I think more and more companies are looking for that because it's just so hard to manage all that money and time. And I think they need someone who is going to be this is very old-fashioned language, but I'm not frightened to use it, like kind of the brand guardian who's going to take the idea and make sure that it gets distributed in the right way. I mean, Procter & Gamble's whole model is based on that, which is the kind of BAL model.
Yeah, they do very well, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is that it gets figured out, and if it gets figured out poorly, it's a horrible experience. You said that you're afraid to use didn't want to use the word lead agency, and I fought it my entire life, but I was in a situation where there wasn't one, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that a practical thing that happened. We went to the shoot, and the client hadn't participated in the pre-pro because she was flying, and she thought that she could use her BlackBerry, but she couldn't open the attachments, right? And so we're sitting there waiting for an answer for her, and it's costing us $25,000 an hour, and she doesn't come up with an answer, and then she comes to the shoot and says, well, we can't do this. And so she's blowing, $1 million, because she's overworked. And you have 5 agencies that have to work at her speed, and she's already working 20 hours a day. So the fact of the matter is that she needs help, and the help can come in some form. We're actually pretty good at it as advertising agencies. Our problem is that our learning curve is sort of steep, and all of the agencies haven't figured out everything. They don't understand multicultural along with understanding, digital and everything else they need to understand. They're going to get there. Look at an ad that Draft has in the program. They say they've already gotten there. I don't believe them. But the fact is that, we have to eventually get there.
And clients will pay agencies to do that.
They will. And I think the other thing is, and I'm now going to embarrass myself, although I've run some very large agencies in my life, I've never been on a shoot in my life. I mean, I grew up in brand planning, so I didn't grow up on the kind of production side of the business, yet I was more than capable of adding value, I think, most of the time, hopefully, to my clients' businesses. I don't think you need to know how to execute everything. You need to have people who do, who are really great at doing that, but you don't have to be intimately knowledgeable about every single thing.
I think we have probably time for one more question. Where there's somebody standing over there.
Yeah, I have the microphone here. I'd like to refer back to your discussion a minute or two ago about the spending certain sums on digital, and it sounded very variable. I was wondering that, and beyond that, just with current media, what budget issues do clients face in terms of, for instance, allocating a media budget for a year ahead? What kind of, do you have issues like that with the client, difficulties in actually allocating out the money as to what might be where?
Okay, well, I'm just speaking from experience, one of the problems that we've encountered, and may or may not answer your question, I'm not sure, but often the internal accounting procedure within a client organisation isn't really fully up to speed with the way in which that money needs to get spent. So I'm aware of clients that separate production and media monies, and they value media as an investment, production as a cost. They don't understand that actually there can be production costs that don't involve any media costs, but those things can still be extremely valuable. So because they're using old-fashioned ratios about, our production budget has to be no more than 20% of our media budget.
Non-working.
That's
that awful?
I was
totally awful.
I thought if I said that, it would give away which client I was thinking about. But, so I thought, sorry. But you're right. It's working and non-working. So that's the problem I face into with, trying to persuade clients that if they can spend more in this area, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come with a big media. They need to think differently about how they assign budgets to tasks and what they're going to get back.
And there are some great companies who can you know, sit down and help you work out kind of where the best place to allocate some of that money is based on their knowledge of the brand and the category. And, you know, I mean, like Market Share is a great company that I've worked with a number of times, and I think they do that well. I mean, you know, they really do get underneath the brand and help you understand the best place to spend it. But you're right, the whole, like, I mean, so much media is earned media these days.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, we look at just audience generation in general, and the way you get there, you know, can take multiple forms.
So let me, since I have to wrap you guys momentarily, I have a favor to ask you. And that is, so as I said, tomorrow I'm going to be leading a panel with a bunch of clients. So,
Tell them we said hello.
So what are the questions, other than your email addresses and yes, your card, what are the questions that I should be putting to them? What are the things that, you know, you want, that you would want to hear or would want to know about from the people on the other side? Don't worry, I won't tell them who told me the question.
I'd love to hear a client talk about, particularly clients that have a role like a CMO role or a role where they're in charge. At what point they believe now that we live in an era where the company isn't necessarily dedicated to them. They will not spend the rest of their life at that company. What part of what they're doing is their personal brand? And what part is the agency brand? I have a couple of high-profile clients that have left, and I've been back to the companies, and the companies said, well, we'll never hire anyone that wants to be a star and write a book anymore. You know, but it's really interesting because that's happening.
I guess I'm interested in, you know, understanding how they get the rest of their organization behind what they need to get done. Because so many of the decisions they're making aren't paid media, working media decisions. They're decisions that help aggregate an audience around something, and they involve many other people in their organization getting involved. So I'm kind of curious to know how they're finding that.
Question I would like you to ask on my behalf. Now, if you work with lots of multinationals, they all have their own kind of processes, and they all have their own ways of trying to get to things, and they usually start with the word integrated, end with the word communication, and the word in the middle often changes. So it could be integrated marketing communication, integrated brand communication, whatever. And so they all kind of have these approaches that are very well laid out and clearly followed. But a lot of the behaviors actually are about disintegration and separation. And so I would ask those clients, those who preach integration, what exactly do they think that is?
You have any buzzwords you want to throw in?
I have no buzzwords. My question would be, what should an agency be?
What should an agency be?
Yeah.
What are they looking for? Well, I want to thank you all for helping me with my panel tomorrow and for helping us here today. Thanks very much.